All right, everyone. Well, thank you for joining us here on our next edition of our Franchise Your Business webinar series. My name's Tom DuFore. I'm the founder and CEO of Big Sky Franchise Team here. And while you're loading in, if you're new to Big Sky Franchise Team or new to our webinar series, we bring in a collection of experts and thought leaders, all orienting around franchising, like we have for our session today. And if you're looking for some new ways to either listen to previous episodes of this session, you can go subscribe to our podcast, Franchise Your Business. It's just the Franchise Your Business podcast. And we also have a weekly podcast called Multiply Your Success, where we bring in various experts to talk about other business related growth activities. And all of those are available at your favorite podcast subscription service. And with me today, we have James Nesfield, and James is with Atlas Mapping. He's been there since July of 2021, and he's progressed from the vision account manager. He became the consultant project manager in August of 22. He works primarily on the consultative side of Atlas Mapping, where he analyzes franchisors' business trade data to find suitable criteria to map their franchise network. But you can always find him managing Atlas's territory mapping software, Vision, where he will be taking demonstrations and supporting clients' needs. And I know that's a large part of why I'm excited to have him on the episode today, to be talking about territory mapping and how he helps his clients through that process. So with that, James, I'd love to turn things over to you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you very much for that introduction, Tom. Really appreciated. So yes, as Tom says, I'm the consultant project manager for Atlas Mapping. I've been here for a few years and developing very heavily into the kind of face of franchising or franchise territory mapping in the UK. And we're doing a nice push into the US because we believe actually that we have a lot to offer. So what I'll do is just share my screen and talk you through pretty much everything you need to know about franchise territory mapping. Great. There we go. So what we're really going to be running through today is what your goal is of a franchise territory, some mistakes that you can avoid, how you should be looking to create your network, and then simple management of your network post-selling to those franchisees. So simply put, what is your goal of a franchise territory? So majority of franchisors are going to offer a protected territory. This usually comes with exclusivity of where a franchisee can set up and just offering that exclusivity that no other franchisees are going to set up in that same area. What you want from a territory is to offer enough potential customers or businesses for that franchisee to be successful. This can be done by defining the area with the franchisee or just by yourself. But how you choose to define these territories and what classes as an opportunity can greatly vary. So we'll look at the 5 biggest mistakes we see in franchise territories. So first of all, using the wrong geography. There's no really recognized way that a geography must be used. So we like to use the 5-digit ZTTAs. That stands for zip code tabulation areas. It's essentially just the US Postal Service or representation of the US Postal Service, the zip codes. But here are some of the examples of alternative geography that we can see networks get into trouble with. Counties. So counties can initially be suitable for territory creation, especially in the less urbanized areas, that they're easily defined. Everyone knows their county, but it can easily actually tie you into knots. Once you start moving into those urbanized areas, you can find that both geographically and demographically, you can be offering too much for a franchisee to service. So an example is Orange County, a population of 1.3 million and an area of 1,000 square miles. What we see here is Denver County. So what we see is actually geographically it's a pretty horrible territory or county. that north side and the Central Park and Green Valley Ranch is really awkward. And what we have here are some holes. Now, these holes are actually a disparate county. They're part of this Arapahoe County on this east side here. Who's going to service it? How's it going to work? It all becomes nuanced for your franchisees and franchisors as yourself to be able to define what's going on here. So Radius seems like a pretty go-to choice for site-based businesses, especially food and beverage. But again, it can tie you into knots and close off opportunity. Really obvious, circles don't fit together. So you leave gaps in between those territories or even those diamonds if circles are perfectly fit together. Even with a mapping system like we use, Vision, you can find overlapping being a real issue, because what you're realistically looking for is these perfect sites in the perfect distance apart. So one of the first things we always do when onboarding a new client that uses Radius is look for those overlapping areas, because double awarding territory or double awarding areas, in worst case, leads to litigation. Often a definition of Radius can be miscommunicated. Is it where the franchisee can set up, or where is it they can solicit for work? Is it dependent upon whether, if it's a food and beverage, if it's dependent upon delivery? So something we've seen reasonably regularly in the UK at the minute is that some food and beverages want to use the third-party aggregators like Uber Eats, Deliveroo, DoorDash. I'd really recommend being cautious of that, because what you're essentially doing is letting a third-party aggregator develop your network. And what we typically see is, well, think of it like this: what if they go out of business? Now, I know a lot of people would really think, how could they go out of business? But in the 80s and 90s, when franchisees were setting up, they used to use the old school yellow page areas, if you have the yellow pages in the US, which I think you do. No one thought that the yellow pages were going to go out of business, but then the internet evolved. Here we are, and no one uses the yellow pages anymore. So really be aware of the type of things you're offering. Hand-drawn. So what we see is just a simple digital representation of a hand-drawn territory. Sometimes they are physically drawn onto a map and scanned into an FDD, or sometimes they are defined by written instructions like following topography, roads. Be really cautious of this, because we have a pretty common saying in territory mapping in the UK, which is no geography is safe. And even if you sit there and say, well, I created it, therefore it must be safe. If you follow topography, roads can change, bypasses can be made, roads can become defunct as a result, therefore are never used. And it becomes a very daunting task of being able to change any part of this hand-drawn territory. Even from a point of going from a physical to a digital, one of the first things that I did when I was brought into Atlas Mapping was create digital representations of physically hand-drawn territories. But some of them were felt tip thick circles drawn on a physical map, and we have to ask silly questions like, well, where is it on that felt tip? Is it the inner edge, the outer edge? Is that actually the center? What happens if that felt tip actually just draws all of its way through a community or town? What's the repercussions? So trying to define them in something specific is the best methodology. And if you have taken this approach, there are solutions to work out of it, but be prepared for multi-year migration plans and the fact that franchisees need to be open for those territory changes. The second biggest mistake we find is a one-size-fits-all approach. So many years ago in the UK, it was an industry guideline that territories must have the same opportunity at the same price. We demonstrated that this isn't possible and almost achieves the exact opposite of its intention. Territories being compared directly to each other despite containing vastly different real-world opportunities then franchisees are unfairly judged or given unrealistic performance targets from those. We recommend working to make sure that there is enough opportunity as a minimum, but if that minimum covers 90% town or a community, it might as well cover the whole thing, as long as it's in a reasonable distance or drive time for that franchisee to reach those customers, or vice versa. Equal territories. So what we can see here is an equal territory. Both of them contain just over 150,000 population. So on paper, they are equal, but as we can see, they are vastly different when put in the real world context. One is a heavily urbanized area, and me being cheeky, what I've done is I've created one that, you know, covers a large spread, but that is the point as well. Geography is not equal. This territory we see in Santa Rosa also contains just over 150,000 population. The areas that are shaded red are probably not sellable, A, because they don't contain 150,000 in population, and or they are just not attractive to prospective franchisees. So in actuality, even though it's bought a territory of 150,000 population, that franchisee gets access to the whole of Santa Rosa. Making them too big. So it's one of the most common things we see for new franchisors. It always comes from a good place. I want my franchisee to succeed, so I'm going to give them a bit more than I maybe should, both geographically and demographically. How can that be a bad thing, having a franchisee succeed? The problem is, by giving away too much now, you remove that opportunity for franchisees in the future. What if you have great franchisees who want to join the network, but your existing franchisee is not going to give up part of their territory for free? You agreed it was for the best. So this is a theoretical example. Franchisee has been awarded Tucson. 4 years into their time, what we find is we plot their customer data, and they are effectively trading in that shaded area, which has around 150,000 population. The rest of the territory is completely wasted. You've got new potential customers asking for the service. You've got new franchisees wanting to join, but that FTD has now trapped your franchisors and it's stifling your growth. The franchisee is unlikely to give up part of their territory without being financially compensated for it, and it then leads you into more troubles. It's a really common example, and what we typically find is territories created by franchisors hold between 3 or 4 actual territories, and once you start doing the math on those, if you've sold 5, it can be 15 to 20 of lost franchise fees, franchises, and then customers, and everything then starts to spiral. Not taking into consideration neighboring territories. So when territories are made reactively for an individual franchisee, it can be difficult to see the knock-on effects of what it can have on neighboring territories. The territory is created not to overlap them, but what it doesn't do is take into consideration the space between and around the territory. It's really important for you to reach as many customers as possible. So plan your franchise territories out. This is a real-world example we have with one of our clients, where they have reactively sold territories and even from that grown the territories within, so added geography as they build. But as it grows, it becomes more difficult to work around these problems. So all of those red shaded areas are communities that are probably never going to be able to be serviced, or even just missed from their territories. We have here in Houston actually just an area that just hasn't been considered. One of the zip codes or ZTTAs hasn't been added to a territory agreement. You start to see those easy potential problems that communities have been missed, not considered, and then, like I say, just not going to be serviceable. So predefining those is a really easy example of just negating all those issues. Splitting towns or communities. So what we often see is once a franchisor reaches their criteria, they cut it off and start creating a new one. it makes sense to just keep a community wholly contained. If a town or a community is split, it becomes less attractive to other potential franchisees. They may have to travel to that area, or actually realistically the customers are going to stay within that community and go to the other franchisee. So here's another example. This city has been split between them. It makes franchisees it makes it difficult for those franchisees to service those customers and limits profitability, because they must travel to it, which is pretty low in demographics, and even that west side, an even smaller proportion to be able to sell to. So realistically, these customers just should be included within that east side. When some or all of these mistakes are made, you can find yourself heading towards what we call the glass ceiling of territory development. Franchising has provided you with access for amazing growth, but it begins to trap you. Because you're in long-term agreements with multiple business owners, it's not easy to change them, and the finance is almost not available, and it can't be grown organically, the irony being that you can no longer grow because you've hit that glass ceiling. That growth of the network is then stifled, harder to find. And then the indirect cost of hitting that glass ceiling can easily reach $1 million plus if you need to start buying back territories from franchisees. The legal process to do so, everything included in that. It obviously depends upon the size of the franchise, but that's $1 million for England and Wales and Scotland, so the UK. For the US, I can imagine it being vastly more as well. So how should you define your territories? We typically recommend the 5-digit ZTTAs, the zip code tabulation areas that I've mentioned earlier, which are just, again, representations of the zip codes. A territory should contain at least enough opportunity for a franchise to run a successful business, but not so much that they can't service the whole area. So where towns and communities should be wholly contained, but as long, like I say, as it can be serviced. Don't make territories around a franchisee or tailored to their needs and requests. It's perfect for them, but as we know during that franchise life cycle, what happens when they exit? You're looking for someone who is their next door neighbor, or them again. So control your geography, control your territories. We like to take a strategic approach to territory design. So what we do is we look at how your business is operating. We plot customers and build the catchment areas around them. We then justify them against your key demographic. And we do this to find your market penetration within that key demographic. We then look at how much opportunity is required for your franchisee to be successful by looking at simple top-level financials. How much do you want your franchisee to achieve? What's the average order value or average customer value? Therefore, how many customers do you need within that market penetration of that key demographic? Therefore, it gives you that criteria. We then look at how many territories can a geography hold. So if you're looking to go full US, how many can hold within there? Or if you're trying to grow state by state, how many can that state hold? And then we predefine on all of those potential territories. So looking at the territory franchise or the franchise territory sales process, what you want to do is identify where that franchisee lives and what territories are available in the area. So what we have here is all of our territories predefined and color coded based on the status. So for example, green is awarded, red is under offer, blue is a deposit taken, and pink is first right of refusal. Once you do that, what you can then start to do is look to share this territory with that prospective franchisee. So what they want to see is the geography you're offering them and the opportunity within. So what we can see here is the territory, the ZCTAs within that territory, and then the demographics. And what we can see is the population has been appended and heat mapped with the ZCTAs to show the opportunity within the opportunity. So we can see that the bright red here in 64565 or 94565, sorry, is around 97,000. So helping your franchisee to say, listen, this is the large scale opportunity, but this is where you may want to start first. This is your easy low hanging fruit. And then as you grow through your territory as well. After the franchisee has joined the network, you classify that territory as awarded to really manage your network. You then have some ongoing territory management duties. So something to be aware of, like I said, no geography is safe. So ZTTAs can be updated. It's not hugely regular, but from what we know, based on our work, the ZTTAs are going to be updated when the new US Census data is released later this year. That means potentially holes within your territories. So when ZTTAs are updated, it can come in the form of boundary changes, so the shapes literally change. ZTTAs are added to the network where new housing associations have been built, or even you can have some removed. You have to manage those territories, so adding the new zip codes into the territory, or if you're keeping your website informed with the territory allocations, then updating to make sure the lead allocation search within your website function is functioning correctly. We also recommend looking at the analysis of your territories post-franchisee coming on board. So plotting location, customer location data, and keeping track of where that franchisee is trading and how well they're covering their territory. It's important to be aware of this because, as we've seen from earlier sides, territories aren't equal and opportunity isn't equal. So monitoring relative performance, looking at market penetration within their territory. You know, they may have just a lower value territory because there is a bit less opportunity than some of the others. So obviously their sales figures are not going to be as good as the other ones. Does it mean they're a bad franchisee? Potentially not. They may have an incredible market penetration within that territory, and they're just actually reaching the limits. But the sales figures won't represent that, but something like market penetration will. So the other thing to know is check where they're trading. They may be trading out of area, but what if that neighboring territory is going to be sold? How is that going to affect your new franchisee or your current franchisee, and potentially both? That's it for everything you need to know on franchise territory mapping. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll take any questions.
Great. James, that was excellent. For our folks that are on the line here, any questions, you can type that into the little chat box or the Q&A, or if you just tap the raise your hand, hit the raise your hand or ask to unmute, I can go ahead and unmute you if you want to ask live on the session here. And I do have one gentleman who's been attending. He's been messaging me, and he said that he unfortunately had to step away a couple minutes right before you concluded there, but he was just speaking highly of your presentation, said this is pure gold. This was great.
Thank you.
So he said it was a great session, and he'll be watching the recording again of this.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. So, well, James, I'll ask a quick question while we're waiting for some folks to type in. How does Atlas, how does the program work? How do you help clients with your system and model that you go through here?
Sure. We have a various range. So part of my remit, either within the division account manager or the consultant project manager, is working with clients for their needs. So what we typically find is emerging franchisors may not be able to take a consultative project to predefine their entire network. So they just want to use our software to create territories themselves. And what we do is We offer training on that system, but give education like we have today, things to be aware of. Because really importantly, what we never want to see, especially for emerging franchisors, is to fall into these issues. They're really simple to avoid, and we see it all the time. The giving areas too big and creating them for their franchisees because they want to get those first 5 on board, but we immediately know the impacts and implications on there. So the Vision system itself is a really easy to use software. We designed it based on our owner and founder created it. He actually taught himself how to code to be able to create it. But it's designed specifically for franchisors. So it's not some really complicated GIS software where you literally need a degree to be able to work it. It is a simple point and click. I want to combine these zip codes. That's it. On the other side is that consultative side where we look at customer data, we find that criteria, and then we predefine them. And at the end of that, all of that just goes into Vision for you to be able to manage your network, share it with prospective franchisees, and go from there. So we have everything covered, we believe, for the franchisor.
Great. Well, and James, what's the best way for someone to get in touch with you if they're looking for some more information? How can they gather more, or maybe schedule an initial consultation or an appointment with you or your company? How does that work?
Feel free to contact us on the socials. So Atlas Mapping on LinkedIn or James Nesfield on LinkedIn. My email address is james@atlas-mapping.com. Feel free to kind of contact in any way. But even if you're not interested in taking a project or you just want to look at the software, we're always really happy to just have those discussions, because what you'll often find is we can point you in the right directions if you're struggling in any way.
Great. Well, I don't see any questions coming through at this point. So, James, before we go, is there anything you'd like to share, get across before we close out for the day?
Just if you have any questions about franchise territory mapping, feel free to reach out. It is one of those very niche information or knowledgeable places. There aren't many of us, so what we really want to do is help as many people as we can. So feel free to reach out, and then just again, thank you very much for your time. It's so appreciated. We attended the IFA convention in Vegas at the start of February. It was our first time over, and the response we had and the reception we had was incredible. It was really nice, and we immediately felt valued and appreciated over there. So yeah, from that point of view, I'm really happy to be here, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Well, great. Well, thanks, James. And I know that's where we connected originally, was over at the International Franchise Show. And so it was great meeting you all there, and glad to bring what you're offering to our audience, to give them an opportunity to get, if they weren't at the show or not familiar, an opportunity to see what you're doing, and for sharing your wisdom with us today. And just as a parting closing comment for our attendees here, if you liked the content and want to share this with maybe some staff at your company, some colleagues or others, this will be posted up on our YouTube channel, which is Big Sky Franchise Team, and just search for us there. And we also have it will be posted on the Franchise Your Business podcast. So, James, thank you for being here. Thank you to our guests for tuning in, and have a great weekend and a great rest of the day, everyone. Take care.